Remember, going on fundamental principles again and again, the failure to return to fundamental principles leave people floating in the air without rudder or sail. A frequent return to fundamental principles is essential to the security of individual rights and the perpetuity of free government, and we want individual rights, we want free government. And the way to government is to teach correct principles and let them govern themselves. It is not to force people. This one, you've seen it several times, won't take long with it, but one of the reasons that so many people do not understand is they don't know the beginning and the end. I have here a book, The Law by Frederick Bastiat, and many of you are familiar with it. One of the finest explanations of the proper role of government you'll ever see. But he knows nothing of the past. He knows nothing of Satan's influence. He knows nothing of the future. To him, it's a matter of having good government for the people that are here. So brilliant as he is, he would be more brilliant if he saw the beginning. And all we need to remember that there was war in heaven, that Satan rebelled because his plan of using government to force people to be good was rejected by God. Keep that in mind. He said, I will save every soul, that none will be lost. How will you do it? Because if you command people and force them, it's criminal. No, I will use the power of government, and then it will be legal. And I will control every thought and act and thing they do. And as we go through this, you see how politicians aim to control everything. I've got a list here after a while that may illustrate that, but I don't care. All right. Now, if you know that, then you know that war is raging on earth today. And so, as far as I'm concerned, in every measure that comes up, you say, what is Satan's influence and what is the proper influence of truth and right and our Savior? Because Satan attends every city council meeting, every Congress, every court case. He has 30 billion spirits to help him, and he is greatly interested in government. That's his pet means of fulfilling his aim. And so, when people understand that we're not just here to live and die and have a good government while we're here, they need to know that if we did not come, we would be little spirit children forever and ever, never learning, never knowing anything but playing with our little toys. But by giving us agency or freedom, we can make our choice and rise to whatever height we're able to do. And of course, in there, I won't go into that too much. We know also that this earth has a time of 7,000 years before it's changed from a telestial world to a terrestrial world. And so we know that the Lord is coming, and because the 6,000 year has started, we know that Jesus, who was the one who volunteered to come down voluntarily and let us voluntarily work out our salvation, he will come as the King of Kings, ruling all the political affairs of the world, and he will come as Lord of Lords over all the priesthood and church and religious affairs of the world. But religion, agency, prayer, revelation, nature, all of these things will be used both in government and in church. So when they talk about the separation of church and state, they merely mean the separation of the function of kings from the function of lords, but they do not mean the separation of religion. The Lord calls it agency, we call it freedom. So keep in mind always that in his term it's agency. An agency is the right to direct your own life with life, liberty, and property, which is a three-legged stool. You cannot have any more if you take one. It doesn't matter which one you take away, it collapses. You lose your freedom. And again, freedom is singular. It is not plural. We don't have all those wonderful freedoms, and don't say, what freedoms have we lost? You are either free or you act under permission or direction or dictatorship or whatever it is. In our country, well, it's largely permission, because they don't want to push us too far until they get the guns away, till we would rebel. So to do anything we want to do to protect our life, liberty, or property, as long as we don't infringe on the right of anybody else to do the same. Free to do anything you think you can do. Try it. But freedom is as precious as life itself. President McKay said it is more precious than life, and you realize that because people give up their lives trying to get freedom. Once it's gone, they'll give their lives for it. It's essential to our salvation, happiness, source of soul's progress. Next, please. Now, keep in mind that we have freedom and force on every issue. Force is Satan's plan of government, and it rules in the world and has ruled in 6,000 years in almost every people. Very few people have known freedom. Unwise legislation undermines free agency, robs liberty, makes us a cog in the wheel of soul-destroying socialism. Another principle is that no matter how evil it is to use force to do bad, most people don't know that it's evil to use force to do good. God will force no man to heaven. We've said that many times. He will not force anybody to pay tithing, to go to church, to say their prayers, to do anything. But He will urge us and plead with us and do everything He can except force us. So much of the trouble in this world, more than anything caused by the criminals, the crooks, the ones all combined, is caused by sincere, wonderful people who think that it's right to use force to do good. And as soon as they get into office, most of them turn to be socialists immediately and say, what can we do for them? What do they need? What can I do for them? There are three general types of government. One is dictatorship under whatever name you give it, communist, legislative, war, poverty. The other is no government, anarchy. In the middle is the constitution of freedom, peace, and prosperity. These always result in slavery, wars. This always results either in dictatorship, either a dictator takes over and becomes that, or anarchy with no government. You remember in the Book of Mormon when the Gadiantans broke up the government, they broke up into tribes all over the country. They had a chief of each tribe, and they become robbers, robbing each other. The tribes would fight each other. That is the beginning. Those are the fundamental principles to which we refer. One of the problems we have is that words have meaning, and many people don't know the meaning of words. By misusing the meaning of words, they cause confusion and trouble. I won't go through it here, but I have a list of long words that people use constantly, erroneously. Another principle is that a law must derive from God, or it is not a law. Every law, where it is passed, must be based on the law of God, or it is not a law. Every statutory law is law that is written. Common law is the law where you can't write it because there's so many things that take millions of laws to do it. You'd have to have a law for every person and every situation you lived in. So the common law, or the law of nature, is the unwritten law. As we said before, the statute law is based on the Ten Commandments. The natural law, tort law, common law, is based on the Golden Rule. And if the Ten Commandments were observed by everybody, there would be no jails, no prisons, very little problem. Mistakes would be about the only thing you had to correct. And if the Golden Rule were observed, why, there would be no troubles between people. Those two simple things would wipe out 500,000 laws that they make trying to achieve the same thing without success. So that's a fundamental principle to which we recur. Satan has no truth in him, but he can quote truth to deceive you. He uses every means possible: imitation, infiltration, substitution, pretense, flattery, enticement, falsehood, bribery, and so on. Every possible means that can influence people, whether it's enticement, oh, this is, or force, I threaten you with this, or whatever it is in between. But usually it's very, very subtle. Again, test for every measure. Is it a problem that needs our attention? If it is, who should take care of it? Individual, family, private group, church, whoever. If an unconstitutional measure is submitted, suppose that somebody brings an initiative or something and you judge it's unconstitutional, so the Congress, the legislature should ask the same questions and reject it. If government can do this, what else can it do? Not only ask what they can do, but what else can't they do? Almost nothing. The communist theory, and this is Satan's theory, is that on the influence of their parents at the earliest possible age. And the words they use, that children should not be infected with parents' narrow thinking. Now that's written in their plans. They're written about how to control people, the many ways to do it, how carefully, how to go into the schools and persuade teachers that it's their duty to teach parents that family is narrow. We're all one family, one word. And they teach them that the Constitution of the United States is too narrow. We're all citizens of the world. These things are being taught to our children very slyly, and they say if you can't persuade the parents, why, get the next generation. As Hitler said, we don't care what you parents think. We have your children, and when they grow up, we'll have you. On the handout tonight, I have this chart on the essentials, principles of Constitution and separation of powers and so forth. Now, the Constitution itself is a miracle of inspiration, the first form of government like this in the history of the world, and it consists of several things. The Congress, which is the most important. Everybody thinks the president's the most important at all. He's the head of the country. The Congress is the most important, and they are divided into two for very good reasons. The president is the executive, the commander-in-chief, and the judiciary is Supreme Court, inferior courts, and due process. And the rights that are not supposed to be invaded, the principle of limited government. Into the Constitution are built many limitations of what governments and states can do. The separation of power is one of the brilliant things, to separate the judicial, the executive, and the legislative. The legislative has influence over, they have influence over each other, and they have influence over the legislature. One day's news, I like to the paper and see what I can find with constitutional aspects in one day's paper. Here is January the 20th, 07. Tempe gets elementary school trucked in 7 tons of snow this week so their kindergarten children can learn about winter. Do you have any constitutional right to make you pay for snow for children? All right. Queen Creek residents fume over the need of flood insurance. Says that a number of residences, the city of Queen Creek has now declared to be in the floodplain. So they're having to pay hundreds of dollars of flood insurance that they didn't have to pay last week. and it will be removed in 2 years after they build a dike along there. Now, how would you like to have $700 or $800 to pay the next 2 years on your property, just in case the Salt River might come up and flood your place? They're based on the Salt River. They call it the 100-year flood, that every 100 years you'll have a flood. Well, we've been 100 and something years and haven't had one yet. All right. That interesting? DNA exonerations raise questions about Texas justice. Texas has turned loose a great number of prisoners saying their DNA showed that they were convicted wrongly. Now, it also says there's a great deal of argument about the effectiveness of DNA. So can that really be used as a witness against a person in his life? Leave you to answer that. This isn't in the United States, but it's an example of how far you can go. China's birth control policy created 90 million only children. In China, it's against the law to have more than one child, and if you do, why, you'll have an operation. And so there are many families that never have a son to carry on the family name. There are many families that have a daughter, and they want to get rid of it and have a son, so they have abortions in order to hope the next will be a son. Terrible thing, isn't it? And you don't think that can happen here? We've had proposals, not laws so forth, but complaints that we're overpopulated, that no one should have more than 2 children. Have you seen that in the papers? Establish the idea and work toward the fulfillment of the idea with law. War is eroding liberty. Well, of course war erodes liberty. Once in war, why, you under the government's direction. John Quincy Adams said it best and reflected the founder's belief when he stated, "America does not go abroad in search of measures to destroy, of monsters to destroy. She is a well-wisher to freedom and independence of all. She's a champion and vindicator only of her own." Congress has the power to control the executive by not providing the funds for war. That's one of the checks and balances. One of the great powers of Congress is that if the Supreme Courts get out of line, they can cut off their pay. They could impeach them, but the control of money, and the House of Representatives is the only place that they can initiate a money bill. The Senate can't do it. They can't pressure the Senate to start money. The representatives of the people from whom the money comes are the only ones that can make a money bill. And so war kind of erodes that away. Tempe readies for code crackdown. All right. So you let the weeds grow 3 inches tall in your front yard, and you plaster your restaurant with illegal signs. You are in the business of outright defiance of Tempe's laws. The city is cracking down on code compliance violations. After years of bare bones staff, they've allowed scofflaws to get away with a lot of things. The complaints about lazy owners even grew emotional last year as homeowners complained that rental housing, lawn parking, plain old neglect were destroying their neighborhood. So the city hired 10 employees who worked 19 hours a week looking for violations in the neighborhood. In just 5 months, these part-time employees issued 870 complaints to homeowners, telling them to mow their lawn, get their cars off the lawn, and pull tall weeds. Now, when Mesa adopted a code, I was the only council member that voted against it. When they adopted the national code, I protested violently. Why should the codes that affect the streets, the houses, the building in New York City be enforced in Mesa, Arizona? And then when they adopted the international code, I went, more people are bothered by these code inspectors. Have any of you had code inspectors come around? I've had them cite me all the time. You parked your car there and you've got to park it here. And you're parking there, it might make dust, so you either got to put gravel or something, so I put another thing. But much time and expense and so forth is caused to people that the government has no right to intercede. Now say, but his neighbor is trashy, it does reduce the value of his property, it bothers me and so forth. Well, is that a legislative matter? No, it's a judicial matter. It's between two neighbors. And the first thing is, if your neighbor offends you, you go to your neighbor and try to work it out. You may go and say, well, I see this poor woman is crippled. She has nobody to mow her lawn. I'll get the neighbors and we'll mow her lawn. You solve that. Or you say, well, I want you to do it. I won't do it. All right, I'll take you to court. And so you have a judicial remedy where both sides are heard, the law is applied. Now in a city council, no law is applied, it's an argument. You know, they say this, and whoever can argue best or who has most influence with certain members of the council win. So one of the great problems in our country is mistaking judicial things from legislative things. If they'd ask that one question, is this judicial or is it legislative, it would save a lot of trouble in city councils and other places. Senate Bill 1156, an act relating to public health and safety, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Arizona, Chapter 21, cancer treatment, that the state has a right to force chemotherapy on somebody that had cancer if he refused to do it, and that case occurred. Parents had a child with cancer, and the court ordered them to have chemotherapy. In the night, they skirted her way and went to another state. Now, that was not in Arizona that happened. But government will go, Satan, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of your health. All right, now it is enough for one day. We talk about government organization. We said that it comes from the Ten Commandments. 40% of the Constitution is derived directly from the Ten Commandments. And I'll give you some example. The law of Moses provides for the organization of government, and it's a beautiful thing. Here's a diagram. I wish it were big enough to see, but at the top was Moses with Aaron and Joshua, a presidency. Next was a council of 70, equal to our Senate. The next was elected representatives, equal to our House of Representatives. Then they had them divided in groups of so many families with and we don't have that, but it is a good form of government. And then any group of 3 million people or more had power to govern themselves. The scope of government, the limitations of government, the qualifications for office holding, government revenue, legislative enactments, ownership of national resources, court procedure, ownership of national resources. The Constitution says that the federal government may own such property as is necessary for a capital not to exceed 10 square miles, and such other property as is necessary for docks and military installations. Nothing else. Today, the federal government owns more than half of all the land in the United States, and it's adding parks and things almost every year. They intend to take over 100% of the property of this country because Satan says, I can control people if I can control the property. And so you say, well, if we didn't have these national parks, people would go in and ruin them, and they do this and so forth. If we didn't have national parks, we wouldn't have so many forest fires. The private-owned forests have very few forest fires except the regular cleansing. But the great forest fires we have are nearly all in national forests. Court procedures. Oh, that's very important. The standards of value. The Constitution says Congress have power to set the standards of weights and measures. Well, that's necessary so we can conduct business. Interest. That's very interesting. That's not the word the Bible uses for it. Lending and borrowing, indebtedness, private ownership, property rights, taxes, tax exemptions, labor relations, vacations, capital punishment, stealing, imprisonment, restoration of citizenship after a prisoner has lost his citizenship, it can be restored, military training, conscription, the draft, military service exemptions, prohibited foods, sanitation, slavery, kidnapping, penalty for adultery, in case of accidental death, and compensation for interest. So all of these principles in our Constitution were derived from the law of Moses. Jefferson and Madison, those men studied the Bible, the law of Moses, intensely in writing the Constitution. The Proper Role of Government by Ezra Taft Benson is one of the finest statements of the 15 proper actions of government. I don't have time to read them at this time, and some of you are probably familiar with this. It's available on DVD, and it's widely publicized. It's a beautiful statement. Congress has power. How powerful is Congress? Congress has power in Article 1, Section 8 to tax as necessary, and there are limitations on that, to spend, to borrow, to regulate commerce, establish rules for citizenship, bankruptcy laws, to coin money and regulate the value thereof, and we have something on that if we have time. Standardize weights and measures, punish counterfeiting, establish a postal system. Congress may make post office and post roads. It doesn't say Congress shall, but Congress may, and wherever private mail service can do it better, the federal government ought to get out and let them do it. Private mail is cheaper, easier, quicker, and better. But when in the early days, when they didn't have private companies and people are far away from the cities and they don't have access to the mail, then Congress may make post roads and provide for it. But in my humble opinion, they should get out of the Postal Service. And if you study the Postal Service and see all the things they do, and realize how much you pay for stamp collectors, why, you might agree with me. Copyright and patent laws, what a wonderful thing that enables inventors to invent things and manufacture and sell them, and it provides the wonderful outpouring of inventions that we have. Establish federal courts, punish crimes on the high seas. Now, whenever you get 3 miles off the shore, you're not in the United States anymore, you're in high seas. Now, how can our government control our ships and our people when they leave that? It's called admiralty. Have any of you seen flags with triple gold borders on it? It's illegal to fly that flag in the United States because it's a foreign flag. It's an admiralty flag and should only be flown on ships 3 miles off the coast. And people don't know it. They say, oh, that's more beautiful than others. And I tried to get the city council to change their flag, but so we like it. How many people in the United States know that? Well, you're smarter than most of them then. Declare war. Congress has the sole power to declare war. When the president orders troops to foreign countries, he is violating the Constitution. And when Congress does not stop him, they are guilty of dereliction of duty. Raise and finance armed forces. The money for wars must come from Congress. The way we have it now, the president has vast resources of which he does not have to account to Congress. Absolutely unconstitutional. Establish rules for the armed forces. Commander-in-Chief is able to command the forces that Congress provides under the direction of the Army and Navy and Air Force that they provide. so he is not able to make a junta or a military force for other purposes. Call up state militias. We, the people, are the government. If the Army and Navy cannot handle it, they have a right to call every able-bodied man to get his gun and come. But in order to do that, we have National Guard in the states for the protection of the states unless they're called up. And we have quite a few members of our National Guard of Arizona in Iraq today, unfortunately. Administer the seat of government, take care of government planning, administer federal lands, and the lands I've already described to you, and to pass laws pursuant to the above thing. Now, Congress claims the power to pass any law they wish to pass. I say, well, we have power to pass laws, but it says specifically pass laws only to accomplish the things we listed here. Limitation of powers. Foreign policy. The founders were very much concerned with the intrigues of foreign governments. Foreign governments make deals with people in our government and so forth. And so they were very careful to secure our country against it with the Constitution. By the way, one thing to mention about the president and his war powers, one of the great means of revolution in countries all over the world in history is that the military will come in and take over the government. Now, by making a president commander-in-chief, he doesn't do it because he's already head. He had no reason to come into the military force and take over the Congress. It's a beautiful thing. All right, the United States should establish and maintain a position of independence with regard to other countries. Avoid political connection, involvement, or intervention in the affairs of other countries. We have troops in 41 nations right now trying to tell them how they should run their country. Make no permanent or entangling alliances. Washington warned against that. Treat all nations impartially, neither granting nor accepting special privileges from any. Promote commerce with all peoples and countries. Cooperate with other countries to develop civilized rules of intercourse. Act always in accordance with the law of nations. Remedy all just claims of injury to other nations and require just treatment from other nations. Your citizens go to Austria or someplace and they're violated or something. You can go to Austria government through your ambassador and demand that they take care of that. And likewise, if somebody from a foreign country is offended or robbed or something here, their ambassador has a right to demand that we take care of it here. Maintain a defensive force sufficient magnitude to deter aggressors. Disarmament, we want to have peace, so let's get rid of all our army. That's one thing. George Washington said the best way to avoid war is to have a military so strong that nobody dare attack you. And so we should maintain a good Army, Navy, and Air Force. As I explained before, we do not start and go through the Constitution article and section by section, because you can do that and anybody does. You can read it in 30 minutes. And people do and think, well, I understand that. But they do not understand the principles, the reasons why. And so we will take up the problems. We're talking about principles and problems in this course. We'll take up the problems and refer to the section to show how they deal with those problems. I've quoted before Ezra Taft Benson's statement, every major provision of the Constitution has been violated. Now that doesn't refer to the structure, the organization, and procedures, but every major provision. How did it happen? One, by amendments. I pointed out to you that the amendments are almost as big as the Constitution. And I'll talk about the Bill of Rights again. I told you that the Bill of Rights was the first great blow against the Constitution. And most people think the Bill of Rights is the most wonderful thing. And then I say I agree with everything in every one of the Bill of Rights. But I do not believe that the federal government has a right even to consider them. We have lost more religious freedom, more attack on our guns, more violation of all of our rights and privileges based on the amendments and not the Constitution. Now, if they were not there, then you look at the Constitution, we say have no right. There's nothing in there. We can talk about religion. Worship as you please. And the fact that the principle is that we should have freedom to worship is a state and individual matter. And the state even has certain limitations there. But that is one of the great things, is a huge transfer of power from the states and the people to the federal government. And all the way through, one of Satan's rules is concentrate power, get it where I can control everybody from the top. So we have that problem with the Bill of Rights. Now, the one on slavery, I agree that I'll agree with it. It was the wrong way, but it was the only way. Joseph Smith and Abraham Lincoln had a wonderful way to take care of the slave situation, but they couldn't sell it to the Congress, and so the amendment is the second best way to do it. Another, the 12th and the 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment provides for succession in the event of both the president and the vice president's disability, and the 12th makes a distinction between president and vice president. In the original Constitution, why electoral college, the electors meet in each state, they vote, and they send the top 5 names that they voted for with all names that had votes. They send it into Congress. The Senate and House meet, and under the direction of the President of the Senate, they count the votes, and the highest one is president, and the second highest is vice president. Now, they ran into trouble very soon on that because Aaron Burr and John Adams were bitter enemies, and Aaron Burr was second. John Adams said, "Don't let me die." And so to correct that, they put the 12th Amendment. Now, the 12th Amendment has some bad things in it I don't like, but I do like the fact that way. Now, the Electoral College, this was January the 20th. Will the Electoral College ever be abolished? There have been 200 proposed amendments to abolish the Electoral College. People say, "Oh, it's no good. We should just vote for the president, and the majority should win." This way, every state has the number of electors that they do senators and representatives. For years, Arizona had 1 representative and 2 senators, so they had 3 electoral votes. Today, they have 7 representatives and 2 senators, so they have 9 electoral votes. Well, in the campaigns before, they could ignore Arizona because nothing. Today, Arizona is inviting all these people, these great candidates, come to us, very anxious for Arizona's 9 votes. But as you remember in the Bush-Gore election, the state of Florida was in a terrible state, and we won't go into that, but just remind you of it, that the difference between the popular vote and the electoral vote, in one case, a critical case, the popular vote was greater than the electoral vote, and they went through Congress and the courts, and finally recounted it 3 or 4 times, and finally settled in favor of Bush. But when people see the problems that the problem of the Electoral College as they see them, they want to abolish it, do away with it. Nothing wrong with that. The Founding Fathers did not want the people to vote for president because they're so influenced by publicity and personalities and everything. They wanted these electors to be appointed, and nobody holding a political office could be one of them. Electors appointed in such manner as the state legislature shall prescribe. The state legislators turn it over to a general election, and then we have these huge campaigns. And then when we get on the presidential campaign, oh, isn't that something? We go on forever and ever. They actually never stop electioneering. Hillary Clinton, I'm in to win the election of 2008. I'm already collecting money. It says that she refused the government money. See, If you want to influence the president, why, on your tax return you can check $3. Take $3 out of here to help elect the president so that all this wealthy money won't affect it. They'll all just take the same amount of money, and that's all. Well, but they can't prevent people from donating. So Hillary says, I can raise $500 million without, and I could only get $86 million this way. So I'm not going to take your money. And in the last election, I think George Bush raised $500 million. Now, with $500 million, what can you do on television and mailings and so forth? You can confuse the electorate so that they have no idea for whom to vote. So the popular vote can very easily be a very bad thing. So the Founding Fathers didn't want it, and that's why they made the Electoral College. Now the Electoral College has been abused. It doesn't work the way it was intended to, but if it did, all these big election things would be over with. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Think of all the diversion of money and time and attention. Our newspapers every day are calling attention to this or that and things of this sort. So the Electoral College was a brilliant, inspired provision that has been violated. The 14th Amendment. This came out in a magazine just recently. Andrew Johnson, unreconstructed. Andrew Johnson fought against the 14th Amendment for a time. He became president after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. And he was very staunch for Constitution. The Republican Congress at that time was a very strong, bitter Congress. They were persecuting the South, the carpetbaggers, and without going into it, they were trying to keep the South as slave states with no voting power, and he defended it. They tried to impeach him. The House impeached him. The Senate lacked one vote of convicting him, so they couldn't get him out. But his efforts to prevent the 14th Amendment were great. Now, the 14th Amendment, you say, well, the 14th Amendment gives everybody equal rights and so forth. Satan gives you equal rights to take away all of your rights. The 14th Amendment is a bad thing. The 16th Amendment is the next one I'll comment, because the 16th Amendment is a day you lost your freedom. By the way, the 16th Amendment was never properly ratified, but because it is in effect, because the day the income tax amendment went into effect, the government owns 100% of your money. Anything that the government does not take in your taxes is simply their permission to spend this much. And they try to get it as high as they can without causing a rebellion. Right? The next thing it does is destroys your privacy. The federal government now knows who your doctor is, where you buy your groceries, what groceries you buy, who finances your house. They know everything. They can go into the privacy of books. Privacy of papers, houses, personal effects is completely destroyed. The government has total power, and there's nothing they can't take. If they want your house, eminent domain, they can take it. If they want your children and want to force your children into school when you don't want them to, they can do it. And so without listing all of it, the government now has total power over your life. And the fact that they don't push you too far, again, is because they want you to think you are free. If you think you own your business, you work hard to make it success. And they stayed in there, said, if the businessman thinks he owns his business, he'll work hard. If he thinks we own it, he won't. So, deception. Satan. Every act should say what is Satan's influence and what is freedom's influence on this measure. Well, let's talk about money, shall we? Congress has power to coin money and regulate the value thereof. What is coin? Is this coin? Does Congress have constitutional right to print money? No, they don't. It's all right to print a note payable in money. And when I was young and handsome, a long way back, we had bills like this. Silver certificate payable to the bearer on demand, $1 in silver. What do you have? $1, a piece of paper, and as long as you think it's worth $1, and everybody does, we print it, if people ever realize that it's not worth the 3 cents it costs to print it, money will collapse, and the people who have stored gold and silver will be in business. Other people, for the period of blood and change that appear, we're going to have to go through a period of, I think, maybe 1 to 3 years. Money probably will be useless, and people have gold and silver will be well off. Inflation is the next thing. Inflation is created by the Federal Reserve. Now, Federal Reserve note, well, that makes it a government note, doesn't it? As many of you know, the Federal Reserve is a private organization. They use federal to make you think that it's a government organization, but the Congress has given them the power to make money. So they print this and sell it to the government at a high rate of interest. So not only don't you have money, but you're paying for these people to print your false money. Some of you may remember when we had United States of America, Abraham Lincoln was paid to the bearer on demand $5 in silver. Wonderful day. Now, I mentioned last time that FDR took away the gold, but it was restored in 1974, but not as money. Now, when it says Congress has right to coin money, does that mean that Congress has a right to own the money? No. Congress shouldn't own the money. The people should own the money. It meant that you could take your gold to Congress and they would make coins out of it. Because if everybody made coins, why, they'd be different. But by giving Congress the power to coin it for you and to regulate the value, it becomes uniform all over the country. So instead of the government taking all the gold and silver and parceling it out like this when you buy it from them, they should merely coin it for you. Is that a new principle to many of you? Hope so. So by living on borrowed money, the value. When I was age of Aaron, with a nickel, anything that you can buy with $1 today. 5 cents. Gallon of milk. One of the means by which our Constitution is being destroyed is by subversion. That's one of Satan's plans. Infiltration into government. Subversive elements have penetrated our government, are betraying us and influencing our legislation. That's from the Jenner Committee, which investigated communism. Another means is invasion. Congress shall to guarantee each state a Republican form of government and protect them against invasion. Now, I have articles here showing how several cities are trying to stop immigration. They're not able to do it. The immigrants are coming and taking over the welfare and the hospitals and in many ways are conquering our country. Now, if an army with guns and bombs and bullets came in and did what these people are doing, it would be a war of conquest. This is a war of conquest without weapons, and it's just as deadly. But Mesa abandons efforts to quell illegal immigration. They've given up, but it's not Mesa's job. It's the federal government's job to protect us against invasion. And we've got troops all over the world, and they don't have anybody to put on our borders. There is a way constitutionally for people to come into this country, either as visitors, temporary, or to become citizens. And the requirements to become a citizen are outlined very carefully. It takes at least 5 years, a minimum 5 years, and there's certain things they have to do, including a knowledge of the Constitution and an oath to uphold it. Now, you are not required to take an oath to uphold the Constitution. Who is? Every officer and appointed officer, an employee of the government, is required to take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. That applies to school teachers, the janitors who mow the lawn on schools. Now, they don't know it. They sign that paper, but that paper says that they swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States. I can understand why they want to, because their very job is unconstitutional. I remember a picture in the paper of Congress, first meeting of Congress. They're all standing there with their hands upheld, and they're administering the oath of office to them. The very first measure they passed was a violation of the Constitution. And so, again, much of it's ignorance, the fact that they do not know the Constitution. Some of it is deliberate, but most of it is just because they do not understand the Constitution. And you may say, well, what will this little group here, why should we spend 12 evenings, total of 18 hours plus travel, to learn a little about the Constitution? What can we do? Do you think you'll understand better how to vote? Now, do you think this is the only group that's going on like this? There are groups all over the country. None of them are as good as this one, because I go to the depths of it. But there are millions of people in this country who are concerned about it and are to do. But how many votes are influenced by the people in this room? Ellen and I have 86 grandchildren, and 38 of them are voters, and they have husbands or wives who are voters. We have 71 great-grandchildren, and most of them are not old enough to vote yet. But in a close election in Mesa, we can make a difference in the election. And some of the politicians know that. Oh, Mr. Stradling, can I get yours? Will you sign it? I have to be very careful whom I support, because there's so many people in Mesa who call me and say, what do you think about this and that? So if I give my opinion, I have tried prayerfully and the best I can to know whether it's right. But I go on the principle the Lord said, therefore, good men, wise men, and honest men should be diligently sought for and upheld in office. And so, again, that I hold 1% of this government. I hold as much as you do, but you hold as much as I do. I hold as much as the President of the United States do, or the governor, or the mayor, or anyone else. They have certain responsibilities, but as far as government power, everybody in this country stands alone. And his one vote might make a difference, but it will make a difference in him, because we must account for every vote that we give or did not give in the judgment. Joe Smith said, it is a sin for a Latter-day Saint to vote for a wicked man. And I know many Latter-day Saints, not knowingly, have voted for people who are socialist to the core. And they don't know they're socialists, they're do-gooders. So the efforts to bring this country back, and again, we're coming back. I'm not doom and gloom. I'm very optimistic. I know we're going to win, because it's the Lord's battle. So your influence and the number of votes that you influence may possibly affect an election. Your influence on your children, your families that don't even attend this, will be for the good. So you are exercising your responsibility as a citizen by learning the Constitution so that you can vote wisely and well. One of the reasons that we are losing our freedom, now there I made a misstatement, but one of the reasons that our freedom has been taken from us is crime. Now, it's a natural tendency of people, as we pointed out in our little island population last week, that people learn that when they cooperate, trading their bananas and coconuts and fish and so forth, they can do better than if everyone has to go around and collect them all. And then we pointed out that the nature of a person is to get things as easily as possible, and plunder is easier than work. So the certain number of people, not all, but there are enough to cause trouble, that would rather steal than work. And if they can steal and get away with it, why, they will do it. And so, because we have policemen, most people won't steal. Suppose that the police force of Mesa announced that the police force of Mesa would be disbanded tomorrow morning. By noon, pillaging and rioting would be going on. Why don't people steal? Why do they do it in the night and sneak? Because they're afraid of the police, or they're afraid of somebody's guns. But take the guns away, the criminals have no fear, and if they can evade the police, they have no fear. So the power of self-defense, which is one of the three legs on the stool, the right to our life, to use force to defend our life, we delegate the force principle. That's one of the 4 reasons that force can be used legitimately. There's one of January the 20th. Ex-representative sentenced to prison, and explains that he's guilty of accepting bribes in order to influence legislation and so forth. It goes on all the time. There has never been a time in the last 150 years when there has not been a former congressman or more in prison, except for one period of 3 months, but 3 were under indictment and went to prison. It goes on all the time. How many of these things occur that we don't know of, not discovered? And so we do not trust government. We need to be alert and vigilant and say what they are doing, constitutional or not. If every bill they passed giving favors to that company, this something, had the test, is this constitutional, it could never be passed. See how simple that would be? Applying that test to it in the beginning. Now then, the more laws you have, the more criminals you have. The more business is regulated, the more you're complicated your taxes, the more the disposition of honest, good people is, well, I won't count that. Or the OSHA regulations are expensive that I won't enforce them in my business. And so the more regulations you have, the more ability the government has to arrest you. And as I stated last week, there is not a business in this country which the owner could not be arrested and convicted of violation of some law that he didn't even know existed. So the more laws you pass, the more force you use, the more resistance and crime will come. And as you know, our prisons are full and overloaded. They don't have room for all of them. Our courts are clogged. It takes sometimes a year or 2 to get your case in court, and all because we don't observe the 10 Commandments, the Golden Rule, and the Constitution. Political parties. Oh, I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat. Well, I'm neither. I'm a Libertarian. The Founding Fathers did not want us to have political parties. George Washington warned against, they called them factions. They didn't call them political parties. You say, well, what will we do if we don't have political parties? Well, what would we do? The political party should never appear on the ballot. Only on the ballot should be the names who qualify to run for the office run. Now, you say, well, people naturally form political parties. They will. The Whigs and the Tories and this and that, they get together, but they do not have official standing. They're like the Women's Club or the Rotary or anybody else. They're a private organization, and that way they do not appear on the ballot. They cannot force who runs for election. They can recommend. They can say, well, we would like Hal Jones to be mayor, but unless Hal Jones qualifies, his name will not go on the ballot. If they would do away with political parties, much of the great election problems and expense and diversion from our work would be at an end. That's another great blow to our Constitution. Supreme Court interpretation. Is the Supreme Court supposed to interpret the Constitution? Can't you read the Constitution? It's not in a foreign language. It's written in very simple language for the common people to understand. How can it be interpreted? One of the judges of the Constitution says, the Constitution of the United States means what we means. Complete violation of the purpose. The court is supposed to judge whether it is constitutional or not. That's all they're supposed to do. They take this bill to provide welfare or Social Security or something, and they say, well, there's no authorization in the Constitution for that. It's unconstitutional. All right. Now, by interpreting the Constitution, the Supreme Court, and by using the Bill of Rights, they violate our religious rights and every right we have. Now, another thing that most people don't know is that the federal government has divided us into 13 sections that sectionalize the United States. Did you know that? There are 13 sections, and each section has a court provided. We are in the 9th section, and the court in San Francisco, and it is the most radical court in the land. These laws against God and school and against religion, against the Ten Commandments, come from the court in our section. Absolutely unconstitutional. It makes me happy there are so many things we can do to restore the Constitution. We look anyway and find it. Congress abdication. Congress has allowed the Supreme Court and the President to take over legislative functions. The first article of the Constitution, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress composed of a Senate and a House of Representatives. Nobody else has a right to institute money. Again, I mentioned before, but the Congress can control the Supreme Court and the President of the United States by cutting off their funds for any project that they know is unconstitutional. That simple. Now, also, Congress has the power of impeachment. Because Congress does not impeach these judgments, they are derelict in duty. That's another jurisprudence term. We have abdication, which is allowing somebody to take your dereliction of duty, which is to fail to perform your duty, and malfeasance, which is performing an unconstitutional act yourself. And these are the three things of which Congress is guilty. Now, I think I explained to you in one lesson that our congressmen are under a control and power where they're not able to act as they should. If they do, well, they don't last very long. But that congressional abdication, dereliction, and malfeasance is one of the great problems that we're going to solve. Executive usurpation. Usurpation is the judicial term for taking powers that do not belong to you. For example, we mentioned one, the president sending troops to foreign countries without a declaration of war. And there again, Congress is derelict in not preventing the president from doing that. The Congress knows that the president can't do it, so the Congress passes a resolution of Vietnam in which they allow the president to send troops, so forth. But it's not a declaration of war and does not justify the president in sending a soldier 1 foot off American soil. I've mentioned Supreme Court interpretation. Now, I could give endless examples of all of these, but I hope I've given enough to help you to understand how the Constitution applies to these. I did not take time to refer to every section of the Constitution. I referred to them general, but the papers that I have for you tonight will explain some of these things. Class dismissed. Thank you for coming.